So let's continue down this path of database normalization and talk about another really important concept, which is the idea of data tables versus lookup tables. Now, generally speaking, models contain two types of tables. You've got data or fact tables and lookup tables, sometimes called dimension or dim tables. Now, the difference between them is that data tables are your tables that contain those numbers, those quantitative values, typically at a really granular level, with ID or some sort of key columns that can be used to connect it to each of the lookups. So the transactions table that we pulled in through Power Query, that represents a data table. Now, on the other hand, you've got lookup tables. And lookup tables provide descriptive, often text-based attributes or characteristics about each dimension in a table. So let's take a look at an example. Here we've got a data table containing quantity values. So this is like quantity or transactions by day, by product. And what we're going to do is connect this data table to some lookups using these date and product ID columns here. So first, the date field matches to the date column in a calendar lookup. And what the calendar lookup does, the purpose that it serves, is to provide additional information about each of those dates. So the month, the year, the day of the month, the weekday, the quarter, any of those date or time related fields. And you'll see that there's just one row per date because there's no need to replicate all of these rows in the lookup table. And in fact, if we try to pull in this information directly into our transactions table so that we could segment or filter or explore our data at that level, we would have to replicate all of the information in each row of the lookup over and over and over and over every time a duplicate value of a date showed up here, which for many tables would be hundreds of thousands or even millions of times. So like we talked about in the last video, that creates all sorts of redundant data that's only going to bog things down. So following that same logic, we can use the product ID column to map to a product ID column in a product lookup table. And the purpose that the product lookup serves is to provide additional information about each of these product IDs. The brand name, the product name, the SKU, retail price, and so on and so forth. So this is good data normalization practice. Each of these three tables serves its own very distinct, very specific purpose. And that's exactly what you're looking for when you build a normalized data model. Now, continuing on with this concept, let's talk about primary and foreign keys. So with that same example we just looked at, got our blue data table, got our green calendar lookup, and our orange product lookup. The columns in our data table that we used to match to the lookup tables are called foreign keys. They're keys because they're the columns that match to the lookup tables, and they're foreign because they contain multiple instances of each value. So think about it. There are multiple transactions per day, so the date column won't be unique, and there are multiple transactions by product, so the product ID column won't be unique. So these foreign keys are used to match to the primary keys in related lookup tables. So following that logic, these columns selected here, the date column from our calendar and the product ID column from our product lookup table, are called primary keys because they uniquely identify each row of a table and they match the foreign keys in the related data tables. So key takeaway, best way to remember this is that primary keys are unique, one value for each key. Foreign keys can appear multiple times. So foreign keys are the ones that are going to show up in data tables. Primary keys are the ones that are going to show up in lookup tables. So let's jump into our actual data model in Excel and see if we can identify the primary and foreign keys. Okay, so we're back to the Food Mart data model workbook. Let's jump into the data model. And this time I want to jump into diagram view. And this is going to show us all the fields in each table. And this is going to help us understand which are the keys that are primary versus foreign. So transactions, this is our data table. So because this is a data table and because there are duplicate values of each of these IDs, these are all foreign keys. And these are the keys that are going to allow us to create relationships between this transactions table and all of the lookup tables here above. So starting with customer lookup, our primary key is the customer ID column. And then following that is all of the information about each of those customer IDs. Store lookup, we've got our store ID. That's the primary key for that table. Following along, we've got the product ID here. And then for our calendar table, we don't call it the ID, but the date is going to serve the exact same purpose. That's that unique primary key that's going to connect us to the transactions table. So there you have it. That's our summary of data tables versus lookup tables and how to identify the primary versus the foreign keys.